So today we'll learn how to create a login screen in Android Studio. Login screen is also known as authentication activity. So we will use a simple Android application where we'll have uh, two activities. The one activity where there will be two fields, one for entering the username and another for feeding up the password. Then there will be a button, sign in button, and there will be another activity, just a dummy activity. So when a user are logged in, he will be shifted to that activity. So this is as simple as that. So here I'm gonna create a new project. I will prefer an empty activity and I will give some name to my project. Let's call it login screen. Then this project is created. Now this is my Java file, main activity.java, and this is my design view. So I will get rid of this text view, and here I will have two plain text, one for email and another one for password. So instead of having some random username, we'll prefer using email of the clients who we want to authenticate. So let's remove this text and let's give some positioning to this element, the vertical positioning and horizontal positioning. And here we'll also remove this name and we'll also give some vertical constraint or positioning and horizontal constraints or positioning. Then we'll have a button. So this is my button. I will remove this name button and should give some meaningful name to this. So sign in will be a good choice. And then I will of course give the vertical constraint, set the vertical constraint and horizontal constraint for this button. So after this, I will assign this button a function with the name, let's say sign in clicked. Okay, so when a user will click on this button, the function with this name sign in clicked will be called. Okay, and after this I am giving some hint to our users what to fill in these text box. So for this you can use the hint property. Here I will write email, and in the second text box I will give a hint of password. Okay, another thing that I want to do over here is in the password field, this input type field I will set it to password. So this is the number password. This text password, this will be better. So what will happen with this, when I fill in a password, it will not be visible, or it will be visible as dots in the typical applications that you often see that are stored there in your mobiles. So I will click and apply, and this is the design part for my application. So now I will go to my main activity.java, and here I will declare those text boxes that I have already created. So I will use edit text. The first text box, I will prefer to know it with the name email. So this is a reference variable email, edit text email, another edit text, and another field I would use it. I will prefer to use it by the name password. So once you have done this, now it's time you should initialize those text boxes. So I will call email equals to find view by id r dot id dot, it was our edit text simple, and the password will be find view by id r dot id dot edit text 2. So this is our text box number 2. Okay, so after this, then I should have the function that I have attached with the submit button, the sign in button. So I will create a function public void sign in clicked view. Okay, so what should happen when a user click on this sign in button? So that we'll have to write over here. Okay, and one more thing. So what should happen when a user is opening this application? So if the user is already logged in, then a login function should be called. Okay, so I'm defining my login function over here. Okay, so what should happen when a user is already authenticated? Then this function should be called. Okay, so what happens when a user already logged in? Of course, he will be shifted onwards to some other activity. So for this, I'm gonna create another activity. I will choose gallery, and there again a second empty activity, and here I will call, let's say, this activity as snap activity. Okay, so I will click finish, and this another activity, snap activity, is created. So this is a kind of dummy activity as of now. So when this login function is called, I'm writing intent so that I can shift my user to the snap activity. Intent equals to new intent, this the current context, and the second parameter is snap activity dot class. Okay, and then you will have to call the function start activity, and you will be passing intent object that you have just created above in this start activity. So now if a user is already authenticated, this login function should be called, and in that case the user will be shifted to this newly created activity, snap activity. Okay, so now the question arises, how do we find out that a user is already authenticated or not? So for these kind of things, now we have to go to the Google's Firebase, that is a Google's cloud services, authentication services. So we'll have to go back to, so we'll have to go to Firebase, and there we'll have to configure our project. So for this, I will type Firebase. So firebase.com is available, and here I will click on go to console because I'm already logged in with my Google account. So when I go to console view, you see there are a few projects that are already created. So if you are working for the first time on Firebase, then you may see this area as empty area. So now I will create a new project. I will click on add project, and here it asks me to give a project, to give a new project name to this, to my project in Google's Firebase. So I will call it snap, no, login screen. Okay, so this is my project name here. It need not be same as that of your Android project. Then I will disable this Google Analytics for this project because I do not need it for my current application, and then I will click on create your project. So Google Firebase is creating a project for me, so I can have to wait for a couple of minutes until it is creating a project for me. And I must tell you, there are not only the authentication services, there are other services available to us by Google Firebase as well. So these are the database services apart from authentication services. There are Google Analytics that we just have disabled. Okay, and there are storage services. So in storage services, you can store your images or files in database services. You can you can perform typical transactions as you do with your other databases, and authentication services is for authentication that we are using now. So before we go to authentication, before we click on this authentication button or we go to the authentication services, first we will have to do some mundane tasks. So this is about registering our Android project with this Firebase project. Okay, so here you will see that this is a button for iOS, this is a button for Android, and this is a button for web. So because we are working on Android project, so I will click on this Android, and here it is asking me to give my Android project name. So I will go to my application, and here I will copy this package name, and I will paste it back in this text field, and then I will click on register app. So by this, my Android application is registered with Firebase, and as a step number 2, I will have to download this configuration file, google services.json. So I will click on it, and this will downloaded a google services 1.json file in my folder. So why it is 1? Because I have already downloaded google services.json earlier. So what I must do, I must delete it from here and rename this to google services.json. Okay, so your file name should be google services.json only, otherwise it will create issues. So where will I paste it? Where will I copy it? I will go to my Android Studio, and here instead of this typical Android view, I will go to the project view, and here inside the app I will paste it. So it is stored inside src folder. So now I will go back to my Android view because I am quite comfortable with this view. Now let's go back to our console. So here they say after downloading your file and paste it to this location, click on next. So as a third step, I see that they ask me to make some changes in my build.gradle file, project level build.gradle file. So they want me to add this line there. So I will copy this line inside dependencies. So I will copy this line and will go to my project level build.gradle. You can see there are two types of build.gradle. One is project level, another one is app level. So I am going to project level, or here inside dependencies, I will add this line. So one thing to note, whenever you make a changes to your Gradle files, always click on sync now. I will go back to my Google console. Now when I scroll it down, they say now at the application level build.gradle, you should copy these two lines, but I know that this line is already there in my application build.gradle. So I will copy this line, com.google.gms.google services, and there inside my app level build.gradle, I will paste it over here. Again, I will click on sync now. Okay, so I have fulfilled the requirement, so I can continue to console. So now as you can see, they want me to go to authentications. Okay, so this is our typical authentication screen, and here in this place you will find new users that are being created. So if a user is there and is available on this screen here in the users tab, then only that user will be authenticated. So now the next step for us is to write some code, and what code we should write for that, we will have to go to docs. So I will click on go to docs, and here there is some very well written documentation that is available for us. So I will go to this Android because I'm working on Android. So when I click on this, there is a quite interactive guide is available for us. I think everything that we want to do in our project is available in this guide. So first I will have to go to appropriate place there, For example, I have clicked on Android and then inside authentication because I want to perform some authentication. Okay, so here I will go inside Android and will click on get started with the Firebase SDK. So you see this whole documentation is available on the right pane, and here I will, they say first add the dependency for the Firebase authentication in your app level build.gradle. So I will copy this line and we'll go back to my application level build.gradle, and here inside these dependencies I will paste this line, and because I have changed in my build.gradle, so I will click on sync now. Then when I scroll it down, they say that declare an instance of Firebase auth. Okay, so I will copy this statement and I will go to my main activity.java, and inside this class I will declare Firebase auth. Okay, so I will go back to my console, and now they say in the onCreate method you should initialize your Firebase auth. So I will copy it and will go to my onCreate, and here I will write auth equals to Firebase auth dot get instance. So I will go again back to the console, and here there says when initializing an activity, check to see if the user is currently signed in or not. So they want me to do it inside on start function, but I actually don't need this. So I will copy this line Firebase user current user equals to auth dot get current user, and will go back to my application, and here inside the onCreate itself I will paste it. So Firebase user, I will import the corresponding class for Firebase user. Okay, so now when I look back at this documentation and I scroll it down, I will see there is a code written for sign up new users. And when I scroll it down further, I will see there is a code written for sign in existing users. Okay, so before I copy this code, I will go back to my project and we'll see what can we do further. So as we see in the create activity on create functions, so now we have mauth, the instance of mauth, the instance of Firebase authentication as the mauth, and then we have the availability of current user with us, whether the current user is available or not. That means the user is signed in or not. So what I will do further, I will check if current user is if current user exists or not. So if current user is not equals to null, okay, so the current user will be null when there is no logged in user. So if current user is not null, that means a user is already logged in, then call the login function. Okay, and what is the login function? Login function is the function that takes a user to the next activity, our dummy activity, snap activity. So this code tells us that if a user is already logged in, then call this login function and take the user to the next activity. Okay, so suppose if a user is not logged in, then what will happen? Okay, so if a user is not logged in, then user definitely will fill up his credentials, his email in this box and password in this box, and then he will click on this button sign in. So okay, so what I will do, I will go to my main activity.java, and this is the function that will be called when a user will click on that button. So for this, when a user click on sign in clicked, then I will call a sign in function. Okay, so this is red because as of now I have not created any sign in function. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a sign in function, public void sign in. Okay, so when a user, suppose he fails to sign in, that means there is no corresponding email ID and password that is available in the Google based Firebase authentication page. So what will happen then? So to make this application simple, what we will do, if sign in fails, then our program will sign up that user. That means if a user is that means it will consider this user as a new user, and instead of throwing a message that you are not able to sign in, etc., etc., you will just sign this user up. So I have another function called sign. Now I will go back to my console, and this is the code for sign in existing user. So I will copy this code, and in this function I will paste this code. Okay, so I don't need these comments, I don't need this line, I don't need this log, I don't need this update, I don't need this log. Okay, so if toast is there, I can handle it. This auth result, so I will import the corresponding class. I will import the corresponding class. On complete listener, I will import the corresponding class. Okay, and task, I will import the corresponding class, and here instead of email I will write email.getText.toString, and here inside password I will write password.getText.toString. So here in case of email activity.this, I will call get application context. So this is my sign in part, and I don't need this line 2, so I will get rid of this. So it says if the task is successful, that means if a user when presses the button sign in, so if this task is successful, that means a user is authenticated. That means that email ID and that password is available with the Google Firebase authentication services. In that case, you should call login function. So if a user is authenticated, then call login. That means take that user to the next screen. And if that sign in fails, that means there is no entry in the authentication Firebase authentication services for the corresponding email and password. In that case, you will make a generate a toast and says that let's say authentication, instead of authentication field I say mismatch. Okay, and what we want to do when there is a mismatch, so in that case we will sign up. Okay, so signing up, and then call the function sign up. It's not capital P, sign up. So now we'll have to write the code for sign up. So we'll go back to our console, and here we'll say this is the code for sign up new users. I will copy this code and we'll go to my Android Studio, and here I will paste this. So again, I don't need these comments, I don't need this update, I don't need this log either, I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this get application context, and instead of email I again want email.getText.toString, and here for password.getText.toString. So if the task is successful, that means a user is created, then what should I do? I should call sign in. So if a user is created, then call this function again and check if the task is successful, then call the login and take him to the next screen. And if the creation of the user is unsuccessful, then I am pretty satisfied with the text, with this text that authentication is failed. Okay, so I think this coding part is all set in place. Okay, so now let's go back to our console part, and here as you can see they are asking me to set up a sign in method. So I can either click on here or I can directly click on this tab, sign in method, and here you will see there are a number of sign in methods. So in the modern applications, you have seen they ask you to log in with Facebook, to log in with your Twitter account. So these are those different options, but I am pretty straightforward and would like to sign in my user with a typical email and password system. So I will go and click on this pencil and will enable email password system. And here I will, what is this, email link sign in passwordless authentication. So I will disable it and will save. So as you can see, against this email password provider, the status is set to enabled. So I think everything is all set from my place, and now I can make a call to this application. So I will click on start, and as you can see, let's see if it runs or there is some error. So what I see is that there is some error, and it says that SDK min SDK version 14 cannot be smaller than version 16. So what I will do, I will go back to my application level build.gradle here, and here I see that min SDK version is 14 and they are asking me to set it to 16. So I will set it to 16 and click on sync now. And again, I will click on this run application button, and we'll see if this application of login appears or not. And this application is there. So what I do, let's try to give some email j@gmail.com, and let's give it the password 123456, and I click on the sign in, and it says that login screen has stopped with some error. So let's find out what this error is. Could not find method sign in clicked view. So I think I have made a mistake somewhere in my main activity.java sign in clicked. So what was my method sign in clicked? So spelling is mistake, CLICKED. So now it should work. Okay, so I have to click on j@gmail.com and then 123456, and I click on sign in. So they say mismatch signing up, and it has signed up, and you see I am already shifted to my login screen, that dummy screen. So let's go back and check on the authentication console. Oh, great. You will see that a user with the identifier j@gmail.com is already registered, and this is some crazy user ID that is given to this user. So this is, you can say, this is like a primary key for this particular record, for this particular entry. So I'm going back to my application, and as you see that I'm already on the dummy screen. So what I will do, I will again start this application and see whether it wants me to log in again or not. No, it is taking me directly to the second screen, that dummy screen, login screen. So what actually is happening, because this user Jay is already logged in, so what it is doing, it is taking me directly to the second activity and not prompting me to log in again. So if I click on this back button and suppose I again start the activity, so you will see that it is taking you again to the login screen. So that means by clicking on this back button, I am not logged out. The user is not logged out. And you may want some of your applications that if a user click on back button, for example, in your banking application, if you are trying to create a banking application, and if your user click on back button, then that user should be logged out. So for this, what you should do, you will have to go your dummy screen, the snap activity in this case, and here you should create a function on back pressed. So on back pressed is a function that typically will be called in the case when a user will press on the back button. And here what I will write, I will copy this code, private Firebase moth, and will copyright it here, right here. And again, I will go back to my on create method in the main activity and will copy this and paste it over here. So when a user will click on back pressed, so I will call mauth.signup, as simple as that. And now I will again run this application and we'll see whether on clicking the back button I'm signed out or not. As you see, if I restart this application, I'm already ported to the login screen. That means I'm already signed in. Now I'm clicking on this back button. So let's check whether I restart this application, this login screen is presented to me or I am taken to the that second activity. So I'm restarting this application and you see this is asking me to give to authenticate myself. So let's say I give j@the rate of gmail.com and I will give 1 2 3 4 5 6. So let's see what happens. It is taking me to the login screen. I am, that means this user is authenticated. Now do it once more. So when I click on back button, that means I'm logged out. And here, instead of J, I'm creating another user. Let's say pp@the rate of yahoo.com. And here password, I am again giving it 1 2 3 4 5 6. One thing that you must note over here that your username as well as password, they must be at least 6 characters long. Otherwise this system will not throw an error and you will never find out what is the problem with my application. So do remember this thing, your password and your username should be at least 6 characters long. Okay, so now I click sign in and it says there's mismatch and signing up. So it is creating this user for me and the new user is created and I'm shifted to ported to the login screen. So let's check in the Google Firebase. I will click on refresh and you will see that 2 users must be created. So one was already there and this is the second user that is created. So I hope you enjoyed this application and I hope this will be useful in your careers and in your future endeavors.